Hello everyone, and welcome to the Future of Dogs podcast, a place for the whole dog world to come together and ask the big why and what if questions that will shape the dogs of the future. Join me, Hannah Malloy, as we chat to some of the world's most groundbreaking professionals intent on enriching and evolving the future of dogs. This podcast is in association with Amplified Behaviour, my online video learning library for dog owners and dog geeks. Big thanks to my dog's favourite food and our Season 1 sponsor, Nature's Menu. With over 40 years in the pet food business, Nature's Menu is Europe's leading expert in raw and natural pet food. So let's jump into the conversation. Welcome to another episode of The Future of Dogs, and this episode is titled The Future of Dog Rescue Part 1, and it is my absolute pleasure to have Kelly Gorman Dunbar with us. Kelly is a professional dog trainer, an industry consultant, and an educator and mentor for dog trainers. She's the co-founder of Open Paw, which is a non-profit program that provides education and training for shelter workers, volunteers, and animal residents to help shelter dogs and cats not only get adopted, but stay in their homes through behaviour problem solving and prevention. Kelly is the COO and Training Director for Sirius Puppy and Dog Training in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is their largest puppy training school. And she's the originator of the concept of off-leash puppy classes. She's also a content creator and an instructor for the Dunbar Academy, an online educational resource for both pet professionals and owners. Kelly contributes to various publications and has lectured internationally on the topics of puppy training and shelter dog training and enrichment, as well as scent work. Personally, Kelly splits her time between Berkeley and a small farm in the Pacific Northwest. She has 2 Belgian Shepherds and Malinois, whom she competes with in French ring sport. She's got a rescue rehab Rotti, who she's taken for aggression issues, and 2 terriers named Villanelle and Eve, and a rescue Frenchie who provides comic relief and loads of humbling moments daily. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Hannah. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Open Paw is my passion, and I think in my entire career. So I appreciate that you're giving me the opportunity to speak about my program.
I'm really over the moon that you've come and join us, Kelly. You are a super busy lady. And I know that you've got up before the crack of dawn because you live on the other side of the planet to me. And you're making some time for us, which we really appreciate. I think, to be honest with you, the most important and first question that I can ask you is, how did Villanelle get her name? And why is it that only the terriers are mentioned by name in your bio?
Okay, I love that you asked that. The thing is, if you know, you know. Yes. So it's Villanelle and Eve. They're the characters, the prime characters in the show Killing Eve.
Okay.
Oh, if you haven't seen that, you must.
I have heard of this. Yes, go on.
Dark humor,
Yeah,
like
sure.
I don't know. It's in the first season, especially brilliantly written. And it was, I think, a novella first, which I have not read yet. But I love the show. I love the characters, and my little terriers are supposed to be my little murderers.
I love it.
It was a crime show, and they're both kind of dark characters. So I had little Villanelle, and then of course when I get my second terrier, I thought, well, she has to be Eve. Counterparts, it's like a Holmes Moriarty kind of relationship in a way.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. They're like Bert and Ernie, but a little bit darker.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder about Bert and Ernie. They may have some more darkness in them.
To be fair, we could roll back, couldn't we, and really start to analyse that relationship and go, what is happening here? Let's be fair. I love that. I love that you've gone straight in for like terrier personalities that will kill stuff. That's their job. That's what they're bred to do for a living. That's really cool.
I got the terriers. I've wanted a border terrier forever, and I got them when I got the farm. Basically, I thought, well, every farm needs a terrier. And I thought, every farm needs 2 terriers. They're tiny. It's like I could probably have 4 to one of my big dogs. So
it's true.
And so that's why also I just, they're mentioned by name because it's amusing to me. The others do have names.
I was going to say, there's a lot going on there. I was like, okay, the one is for sport, the one is for comedy, but these two I get it now though, that makes sense.
Murder.
It shows me some of your, yes, murderous terriers. I'm going to have to watch that show now. That's it. I don't know why I've avoided it for so long. Life is long, hey? So Kelly, I actually met you a couple of years ago. I think it was about 6 years ago now, in 2017.
Yeah, too long ago, really.
Yeah, too long ago, pre-COVID, BC, as they say, before COVID. And you were working with a shelter called the National Animal Welfare Trust in the UK. And I was privileged enough to come across some of your teaching. And personally, Kelly, I was just blown away, because I didn't understand why this wasn't standard. Like, I figured it was brand new in 2017. Really here on the show, what we tend to do is look at the past, present, and potential future of a particular industry.
Yeah.
So before I fangirl off on Open Paw and how much I love it, can you tell us from your perspective what your individual what if is that, should we all follow, might change the world?
For the future, obviously, right? What if we? Yeah. Well, I mean, in a broad sense, it's what if we really reimagined animal sheltering? I mean, maybe that's too broad, but I feel like I know the system is archaic. It was kind of an afterthought. Animal sheltering was not animal centered when it began. There wasn't animal welfare. It was more about protecting the public from the animals. And getting the riffraff off the street than it was about, helping support the animals in our community that do so much for us. And, we certainly, the physical centers have barely changed in most cases. Obviously, there are exceptions, but it's an institution. And I mean that in the literal sense. These are mostly institutions. They that people are focused on often just the triage of getting through the daily life. And I just think there's room now to reimagine for a new century how to take care of the animals in our communities.
So, and there's so much there. And I completely agree with you, Kelly. Like the way that we look at in many different areas, actually, education. I certainly in England, like strangely, I think our hospitals and our schools were built at the same time, and you can kind of see that in the way that the buildings are so like put together in such a particular way, and it actually changes your behaviour, the way that building is built, which is fascinating. But can you, for those that aren't connoisseurs in the world of rescue, can you tell us what does the past look like, and actually for some places the present? What are those things that you see that you're like, oh my gosh, that doesn't work, it's a bit of a broken system? What are you talking about specifically?
Well, the biggest glaring issue to my eyes and mind are the kennels, the dog kennels. The cats, they've moved in some cases a little more progressively. We can talk about that if we're allowed.
Sure.
It's a dog show though, isn't it? But the dogs, there's still traditional kennel runs, there's a large focus. It's heavily weighted towards, disease control or, infectious disease control, which I'm not saying that should not be a focus, but it seems in so many cases that's in lieu of everything else, so we've got what look like prison wards, in most places.
Yeah.
And they are noisy, they're echoey. There's, we think of dogs are such sensory oriented creatures. We use our eyes, our ears and our nose. We barely register compared to them. And I think they're just inundated with noise and echoes, and it's stale, it's sterile. And then you go to clean it, and now it's the disinfectant. Can you imagine the salt on their noses? So the institutions themselves are often quite unattractive or downright ugly, and not inviting to the public either. Nobody wants to go to a prison or an institution. Like you said, the hospitals and schools, it changes your emotional state, and it doesn't really. I don't think people make the best decisions when if they're brave enough to go in and their hearts can handle it because they want to help an animal. I don't know that you make the best decisions if you're not in the right emotional state either.
Yeah.
But the adoptions might come from maybe the wrong place, which is definitely your heart, but also maybe I don't want people to go in feeling sorry for the animals.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's a strategy for some shelters, but I don't think that's where we should be headed. So that'll come with some of the future visions.
I love that. Let's actually not have people make adoptive decisions based on purely quite a manipulative emotional process. I know people who've ended up with puppies that have gone that direction. They're like, I just wanted to get them out of there. And you're like, I don't think that's wise. I don't think we thought through that whole process. Yeah, wow. Okay, so some of the physical structure, the way that it's not necessarily dog-centric. What else? What else do you see, Kelly, from your decades of experience and perspective on actually starting to see change in some of these rescue centres? What are we not seeing as a human population?
Well, there's a problem within the system, and I've seen this worldwide. I've been to animal shelters and presented Open Paw, in the UK. I've done it in Australia. I've done it in South Africa. And all over the US, to name a few. Singapore too, actually. I think.
Come on, amazing.
So but honestly, it's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same, and the whole perspective is also not only does it look like a prison, but the mentality of the carers often. I mean, and this is subconscious for most of them. I don't think they think they're in a prison. Oh, well, some do, I suppose, some of the people. But the idea that this day I'm trying to let's say a kind-hearted volunteer or somebody who works at the shelter that loves animals, which you kind of have to go into that environment every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And watch animals come and go. I see, and this frustrates the heck out of me. This is probably my biggest pet peeve. In now that I've never said that before, but I think it is.
Cool.
I think it really is.
Breaking news: Kelly's biggest pet peeve. What is it? It's amazing.
Is that people are trying to make that day, they're two in the present, that day the best day for that animal that they can do, that they can muster in this environment, versus my perspective, which is I want this day to be good for them. I certainly don't want it to be a bad day, but I want their future to be great. And that future means getting them out of the system. And I think when you're in the system as a human, whether it's whether you work in rescue or a volunteer, you become your brain becomes institutionalized. You forget. That becomes your norm. That's your baseline.
Yeah.
And you kind of become, in some cases, sensitized, but mainly desensitized. So in order to function on a regular basis, you have to just think, this is okay. Like that meme, this is fine.
This is normal. This is fine. Yep.
And it's not fine. No. And it's not better than a home. And just because you love them and you're doing the best that you can, doesn't mean that having an individual care for them wouldn't be better. So I think they lose sight, and people try to make the day best for the animal, but their idea of best isn't really impacting their potential future, if that makes sense. So
absolutely.
To give an example, maybe, so this, I'm not talking in code, people who want to take a young, like here we have a ton of pit bulls and bully breeds, probably there too in rescue. And, they're young adolescent pit bull, let's say here, and they got a ton of energy and they want to run and they want to slam into things and they want to do their thing. And, but that can be overwhelming for a lot of people. They're very physical breeds. They kind of want to get in there.
Yeah. Shoulder barge. Let's go. Yeah.
And, there's some volunteers that also will love that. And I love that, actually. I'm a bully breed person. I don't have one right now. Well, I do. I have a little mini one right now. But the idea is, let's go let them run in the field and just be free, or I'm going to cuddle them or just feed them too much food. feed. Love, food is love, love, love.
Yep.
And, what is happening is these dogs are getting, they're going into, they're learning bad habits. They're getting into arousal, overstimulation.
Mm-hmm.
They are learning to just run and be free and not human centric.
Mm-hmm.
The days are already not human centric enough, because they're, even the best of facilities only has so much time in a day to give to individuals.
Absolutely.
And so, our dog play, which is great. They need some, enrichment with their own kind, but, I'd rather see them get some calm time training, some downtime training, some one-on-one. Let's work on eye contact, nose touch to palm. How do you sell yourself in the shelter? What skills are going to help you succeed once you get out? Because, today can be great. Like, if you're on death row, sure. Like, eat 5 pizzas and, and binge watch your favorite show. I don't know. But if you you have it tomorrow, maybe you change, you eat a different kind of meal and you get out and you go learn something, or you go spend time with your friends, in a different way. I don't like that kind of last day mentality. They kind of treat every day like it's last day.
Yeah, and I love that heart, actually, that what are we trying to do here, guys? We're trying to get this particular individual rehabilitated to live in a human society that is complicated and full of lots of change. I know, Kelly, when I used to work for a major UK rescue centre as a behaviour advisor, and I'd have up to 80 kennels and then about 14 members of staff that I was also in charge of training. And so I totally am with you that sometimes if you're listening right now and you're like, I do work in rescue and it is a lot and I do find it stressful on a daily basis, but this is the system I've been given to work with, that you can just get into a headset of get up, clean, walk as many dogs as you can. And exactly that, Kelly, super hard for a lot of the carers of these dogs in kennels is that it's an easier life often to get a dog into a paddock and let them run. And one of my top areas of education when it came to the workers I was with was, hey, do you know what? When you let that dog just run, and then you put them back in a kennel, you've just like lit a firework. And they're like, I don't know why he's so wound up. He's had like an hour in the outdoor play area. And I'm like, none of that was tiring. That was actually just, and this is a shout out to those of you who have pet dogs and actually just take them to the park and just ball, wow, dopamine. And then they come back home, which is their, lovely palatial house. Yeah. And they're like, wow, I'm so overstimulated. I cannot even begin to relax right now. And they're like, why is he so crazy? He's just had a really long walk. So I love that actually that's a huge lesson we can take away straight away is sometimes actually mind games like touch can be more tiring. Calming training, taking your dog to the cafe and doing some settle training can be more tiring than running. Who knew? That is groundbreaking.
Or just like scent work. Scent work is so, so it sates them in a way that, it satiates them in a way that nothing else does. So 10 minutes of scent work is going to be better than a run. And they actually come out going, versus, because yes, they become over-aroused, become overstimulated, they become better conditioned, physically, if you're just running them. People who run or exercise, you don't come home tired, you come home energized.
Yes, it's so true.
So it's and I know what people listening are thinking or shouting perhaps into their device, which is, we don't have time. Yes, that sounds great. All sounds well and great, but we don't have time for that. And I do within the program, I recognize this. I've worked in shelters. I've spent a lot of time in shelters. I know I'm not trying to just set the ideal. I do think we have to have an ideal in mind. You have to have a goal and, and kind of reach for the stars. Mm-hmm. But my idea is to work smarter, not harder. I'm not trying to make people's lives more challenging. I think there are, if you flip some things on their head, you can find time, So, but also there are some smart ways to do this that don't have to be time, expensive in the amount of time that you do. But that's, I guess, the biggest problem is people are not focused on the future of the dog or the potential future. and it becomes just like triage. Let's get them in, let's get them out, let's get them in, let's get them out.
Yeah. And just, to just give you a round of applause, really, Kelly. When I went to the National Animal Welfare Trust and they were talking about Open Paw, which they have been participating in for many years now, one of the biggest boasts is quiet kennels. And I know that there's loads of potential barriers that many rescue centres could throw up to a systematic change that actually comes with a programme like Open Paw, which we're going to dig into. I know you listeners are like, what is it anyway? But that is such an amazing effect that actually these dogs are not shouting for attention anymore because they anticipate how the environment works. They understand what they can expect in this context. And they're anticipating positive things when people come by. And we're going to get into a little bit more about what Open Paw is and how people can engage with it. But before we go there, Kelly, can you tell me how did Open Paw come about? What's your background in this, and where did this sort of passion come from?
Well, I volunteered in shelters when I became a dog, or even before I became a dog trainer, actually, around the same time, I guess, because, I wanted to get my hands on dogs and I wanted to help dogs and I wanted to be around them. And, and sheltering, it's just always been a part of my life. I mean, I've adopted animals from shelters as a child and as an adult. And, I don't know. I feel bad for the animals, right? That don't have people for them. So anyway, I worked in a shelter in Los Angeles for a while, and I just saw, a lot of problems. But at that point, so I volunteered in a shelter where I didn't have a ton of behavior experience yet, right? Mm-hmm. And then I did get some behavior and training experience, and then I went back into shelters as an employee, and but not in the behavior department.
Okay,
wow, in a different department, and I just got there, and I thought, the heck is going on here? It was just crystal clear that, everything that is almost everything that is done in a day is leading the dog in the wrong direction. And behaviorally, once you see that, you can't unsee that,
absolutely.
So that was really frustrating. I started trying to imagine, I guess, just in my head, what would I do differently? And, do a small private rescue. And then, life changed. I moved to a different town. I left that job and I started working here up in Berkeley in the Bay Area with Ian Dunbar. Mm-hmm. And we started having these conversations. And he also thought a private shelter is the way to go. And these animals should be being trained to be good companions, and, if it's private, meaning you can do what the heck you want. And, and get them trained up and make them create the best possible companion dogs,
Yes.
And so, we were just buzzing along with that when our local shelter in Berkeley, there are two shelters. This is not an enormous town. So they have one animal control facility, mm-hmm. And then they have a private, humane society.
Sure.
And the two were not, as usual, that's not usually they don't always have a great relationship. But the volunteers, the program directors at the two facilities were really good friends. And they wanted to combine their volunteer base.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. The places are just down the street from each other. And I don't know where they got that idea, but that was their idea. Let's combine mm-hmm. their volunteer base. And then they're like, well, we have an animal behavior expert right here in town. So they reached out to Ian and we did some volunteer training. So he and I then, brainstormed, what are we going to do? He did some lectures and I was doing some hands-on. Mm-hmm. And we cross-trained the volunteers to work at both facilities to, hopefully get them to work together a little bit better and strengthen the community. And the focus there was then suddenly the community. It wasn't just the animal shelters. It was about the people. Mm-hmm. And honestly, that's what changed everything, because now it's like, okay, well, we're training people. This is our chance. This is our chance to get people in there. And how do you do that? How do you get people that aren't behavior experts, that aren't trainers, just mm-hmm. good kind-hearted animal lovers, to efficiently get into a shelter and make a change? How do you train just the everyday person who loves animals in your community? And that's where the simplicity of the program was born. So, we trained these volunteers together. Actually, I did the training, but he did the lecturing. And from there, I had Colleen became my first Open Paw volunteer, Colleen Boyle.
Amazing.
And she's the co-creator of the program with me because she dove in. She just moved to town. She's looking for something, a new community of friends, I suppose, as well. And she came to the first meeting, and then she just followed me around after that. We should do this. Can we do this? I'd like to be a part of this. I can write. I'm an educator, and she's a teacher. So
Amazing.
She had the educational background to come in and help us simplify some of the processes of how to teach people in a simple fashion to affect behavior change. So it was a behavior, Ian with his broad scope of behavior, me with my practical animal training experience, and then Colleen with her educational experience. We came together.
Gosh, amazing.
Find a program.
Education trinity. That's incredible.
So, and then we had the blessing, we were also fortunate enough, the UC Davis School of Veterinary Sciences, which is a huge school here in California, a very good, prominent vet school in the U.S. They had just started their animal shelter or husbandry and program, basically. So they were trying to work with infectious disease within the shelter, but again, in a practical way, also kind of focusing on behavior. And they came to all of our first meetings. And so they were able to advise us on things like how to combat infectious disease in a way that, is going to be effective, but also not behaviorally detrimental to the animals. Mm-hmm. Because there were the idea, for instance, this was in 2000, and the idea is still, it's still true in a lot of shelters, but it's changed a bit, is that animals couldn't have toys or blankets because that's unsanitary.
Sure.
So we had a really sterile environment. So now we had the backup of a medical facility saying, well, actually, or don't touch the animals, go from kennel to kennel. And, just, hands off because we're going to spread disease if you give one animal a treat and then go to another animal and give them a treat. And It's not that there isn't some truth to that. It's also not that simple. So we've addressed a lot of that.
That's amazing. And huge improvements in animal welfare as a direct consequence. I cannot even imagine having done my job. I was working for that particular rescue in 2010. So thank you, because, you need to touch dogs. They love it. They find it really reinforcing.
No toys, no blankets, no beds, no treats.
Gosh, wow.
That really was mostly how it went. It was, and no training for the animals, but for the people. I was horrified. We would, in 2000, in 2000 here in the Bay Area, right around the same time we were doing this, there was a series of maulings, and a couple of them happened in shelters, but the biggest one did happen in San Francisco in an apartment building, which was tragic. But right after that, there were a couple in shelters with volunteers because they're these mastiffy breeds, these big bully breeds that are very powerful dogs, and unknown people with no training going in with dogs, often with unknown history, and then doing whatever the heck they wanted, training-wise, like no guidance,
Wow. Yeah.
And there's some, I don't want to victim blame, but in some cases, like people are going in and were using harsh methods on these dogs, that they didn't know and getting hurt, or just making uninformed decisions and getting hurt. And I was, thinking, you sign up, you sign a waiver, you get an orientation, which really is just a facility orientation, no instruction, and then they're like, "Here's a leash. Go walk this strange dog. Yeah, he just came as a stray 3 days ago."
Wow.
And that was terrifying to me.
And then, to be honest with you, I think the other end of that spectrum, especially in the UK, is that rescues probably flipped the other way. I know when I was working in rescue, it was a lot more like, yeah, we like volunteers, but actually we're not really that into having them around very much because they take a lot of time and they're not saving us any time. And actually they're a risk for exactly that reason. And you just think, wow, like, so much more could be done. I cannot tell you how many people want to learn about dogs and handle dogs and love dogs well, that would just, the amount of applications to volunteer at a rescue centre is actually huge for most of the ones I've worked with.
They get turned away or turned off. So that was true even in 2000 in the sense that, they were definitely the ones that let volunteers in, it was definitely willy-nilly. But there was the also, the institutionalized mentality that volunteers were a pain in the butt, and a detriment to their day. So some person who really was like motivated and gung-ho wasn't getting enough instruction, and then was also getting sidelined or glances, or not feeling welcome. And it's hard to stay in that kind of environment. But I did, when I went to the UK, I don't think it was that last trip where I met you, but I think it was the one before. I was at a rescue center visiting with, I think, Joe and Chirag took me to a rescue center. That wasn't one I don't know why we went there. It wasn't one that they were working for or with, I don't think. But they wouldn't let anybody see the animals.
Yeah. Interesting.
Even the adoption, like the shelter was closed.
Sure. Yeah.
People couldn't enter. You could make an appointment, and they would select a few dogs for you to look at. And that also kind of shocked me.
It definitely went that way. I'm not 100% sure where many of these rescues. I've been working with a couple and talking to them about adaptation and change, but I think for a lot of rescue workers, they were like, actually, people walking past the kennels are just working the dogs up. And so I think that's, again, the heart of a lot of these major decisions was coming from a place of loving the dog well and saying, like, actually, this is not a positive environment for them to have random people tapping on glass or putting their hands through bars. And so actually easier for the dog and the staff if we just bring the dog out that you want to see. But then, wow, what a barrier. And was that other sort of aspect when it comes to, working with the dogs on a daily basis, with volunteers particularly? I think just a shout out to you if you work in rescue. I hear you that you are probably not that into people, which is probably why you got into dog rescue, because you love hanging out with dogs. And so to have some complicated humans walking around asking you questions when you're like, I've got loads of stuff to do today. I just feel your heart that's not an easy thing to do without a structure behind it, that actually maybe the humans in those roles don't quite have the skills to people with other people who want to help. So that's hard what you've been doing, Kelly. You've really stepped into complicated human community.
Oh, yeah. And it's been a journey, let me tell you. Not easy most days. Definitely worth it, but not always easy. And change is hard for people. And I do understand the underlying reasoning for a lot of the decisions that are made. I really do. I'm not meaning to poke fun so much as just maybe poke holes. There's a difference, I think. I challenge a little bit of why things are where they are, and sometimes there's a very good reason, but that doesn't mean that that's the only approach that can address the issue. And sometimes it literally is just because it's always been done that way. And then we go back to that whole thing in the early 1900s. Well, they had a very different focus. So I do understand that, of course, animals can be overwhelmed by people coming and going and over aroused and overstimulated, but you do have to look at the whole system. You have to look at it holistically, right? If the dog isn't doing these amped up runs out in the fields and just getting amped up, in one way, then maybe if the kennel runs didn't look the way they do and aren't designed to actually, foster this kind of
antagonism, shouting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Antagonism. Maybe those are the things we change, and then they can. Their room should be a calm, quiet place, and a shelter like ward. The interior should be, kind of I'd rather it be like a little hotel. It doesn't have to be so challenging for the dogs. And so that's we really just looked at the whole Open Paw, looked at the whole thing holistically and said, there's so many things we can be doing differently, and also that would be more enjoyable for the staff and volunteers.
That's what we want, isn't it? We want a system that everybody is happy to be in, that is improving dog welfare and rehabilitating effectively. Oh, Kelly, I want to get you back for a second part because we are totally running out of time for part one. And we're going to dig into Open Paw a little bit more and find out what it is. Practically speaking, hear some of the testimonies that you have. And if it's okay, maybe think of maybe your top 3 ways that rescues could adapt in the future. But before we go, can you sum up Open Paw for us in 5 minutes, if that's even possible? What is Open Paw? What is it?
Open Paw is a shelter training program for shelter staff and volunteers, and for the community that teaches them a little bit about animal behavior in a really fun and efficient way, so that they can impact the lives of the animals in their shelter, in their community, and in their own home. This is helping not only the people in your community who love animals and volunteer or work in the shelters, help the animals in the shelter. That's really the side effect. That's the beautiful side effect, is that the shelter animals become the teachers and the beneficiaries of the education that we give. But then, everybody who is in your shelter, whether they are an employee or a volunteer, or even just a person who comes in the door to look around, whether they're looking for a new companion, or whether they stop by on their lunch break because they love animals but can't have any. Everybody who comes in has an opportunity to both learn a little bit more about animal behavior, which then they can take into their own lives, but also to impact the lives of the shelter animals in a positive way. It doesn't have to be that this is stressful for the animals. It can be a brilliant way to keep your animals socialized and to help them generalize some very simple and basic manners, that will help them navigate better in the human world.
I love it, Kelly. We cannot wait to hear more about this, and we're going to get you back on, if that's okay, for next week's episode, which is the Future of Dog Rescue Part 2. And you're going to blow our minds with how we can start to apply Open Paw principles in rescue. So just from everybody at the Future of Dogs, we really appreciate you coming on and spending time with us today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And that's all we have time for another episode of The Future of Dogs. And you can catch up with us next week for the second part of this amazing topic. And that's it for part 1 of this 2-part episode. Tune in next week for the second part of this intriguing conversation, and we'll see you next time.